This is as groovy as it gets.
Oprah, Can You Hear Me? Oprah vs. Donald 2020 is a conversation by Julie Benetti and Susan Barbaro and a production of EI Alliance, copyright 2019. America is courtesy of New Threads off their new album, Felonious Wilma. Hi, this is Julie and I'm here with Susan, and we're talking about some research that I was doing because I'm doing a project on the Oscars. And I'm not going to give specific details about the research, just kind of the macro view of it is how minimal the parts are for women in Hollywood. And this is well known in the movies, and that there's a lack of certain parts, and up until certain time periods, there were only like prostitutes and, you know, little bit parts for women, and it switched. And that's just kind of a macro blanket statement because, you know, the if you want to look at the 80-20 factor, I mean, you could say, okay, well, you know, Katharine Hepburn's had some good roles, but there were just minimal ones. There were minimal ones, not huge ones. And granted, there were huge parts for men. And there's a woman who is in Europe, I think in France, and she's doing this huge dissertation and research on finding, and I'm not going to go into the specifics of it, but on finding the percentages of women in different shows and different productions and movies, and it's a very minimal percentage, and what their roles are flabbergasting.
So this is the 21st century. Mm-hmm. We have women that in many professions outrank the men in terms of, I mean, we have VCs that are women, we have lawyers, accountants, writers, producers, directors, every aspect of everything, in science, in math, doctors. I think in many cases the women outrank the men. So that study is very telling. Mm-hmm. What the hell are we doing? Forget the men. I'm not looking at the men. I have nothing against men. I think they're actually getting blamed for a lot of the stuff that really has nothing to do with it. You have some of the bad seeds, the Weinsteins, and you know, I'm not going to go through the list of all those who've come down, Kevin Spacey and Matt Lauer, blah, 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 right? We have some bad seeds. I'll call them bad seeds. But I'm looking at is what's wrong with the women? What is going on? We're the writers. We're the producers, the directors. You and I have, you know, we've written a book, a very empowering book for women, Endra. Mm-hmm. She's a modern day witch. She's a woman. And she has her love interest, which is a male, and she works and she participates fully, but she's very empowered. She doesn't take from anybody. She's a very empowered woman. Right. And, you know, and there's other books out there about empowering women. What's going on? What do we keep going to the Game of Thrones? Keep pulling that? Let's remake it. Oh, let's go back. No, friends, let's take All in the Family. I grew up watching it. My parents watched it. It was a funny show. They redid it. Why are we redoing it? I mean, it related at the time. It was a good show, extremely controversial, but it was meant for the time period, the 60s and the 70s. That's what it was made for. Why are we taking that and bringing it back to today? What are we doing?
So, and another part of my research I found, which is, again, like, wow to me, is that everything is a remake. Even going back to the 50s, shows that were in the 50s, shows that were in the 40s and the 30s and the 20s. The 20s are remakes of vaudeville. Yeah. And so, you know, we sit here and we write new stuff.
Yes.
And I think, why aren't they producing new stuff? Why are they redoing? I mean, All in the Family was awesome with Carol Connor and Gene Stapleton. Yeah. And so, all the actors and actresses that they did it. They did it.
So if you're going to break that mold, because we said Facebook perpetuates that. Right. You know, you love to call it death book because it's everyone likes to go in and tell them all my woes, and so Facebook perpetuates it. The music, you know, you still listen to, you know, radio. If you ever put on the radio, it's really all old stuff because it's our generation and older that will listen to the radio. The kids don't listen to the radio. My kids complain when I have it on; they got to listen to it, but they don't. They have Spotify. They put on what they want, and all the stuff that's out there that's promoting. It's like you said. Now, okay, well now here's TV. We're going to go back and recreate. Like we talked Roseanne. You said they're planning on doing all these other shows. And it's like, how do we, expect to move forward, create change, when everything else is keeping us back in time? And, if Oprah were to step into the presidency, one would hope that that's kind of I'm going to say it, a black woman president. That's so different that it would propel us to, we're in a new world.
Right.
We're in a new world. Come on, people, let's go. We're in a new world. It's time to move. Versus, Trump did a lot to move things fiscally. And, but the career politicians are going, it's like going and remaking All in the Family. And then we have all these women that are in these powerful positions. So what are they doing?
And so, a couple of things here, because there really is no big deal to this, and all pun intended. There's no big deal to this because in, England, they've had female prime ministers. What's the big deal? And actually, the one who's there now, I think, is going to resign because she couldn't figure out a Brexit solution. So, and people aren't like, oh, it's a woman, there's no conversation there. So what is that? And sometimes these things, these quote-unquote issues, they're not really what the issue is. It just keeps you, like, standing in place, waiting. And the same old goes on. And so you've notoriously said, and very well in past podcasts, because, I want to borrow your words here, where, and I agree with you. I've been in positions out there in the quote-unquote real world where women are the worst to women.
Right.
They're the absolute worst. And the guys stand there and laugh. And they watch it.
Yep.
And that's great. And then you see a couple of guys, and they're not horrible to each other.
No.
And women are notoriously horrible. So what is that about? And so then, if you're a woman, most women love to work with guys instead. Who the heck wants to work with a woman? And that's not to say that I haven't worked with great women, and you and I are women.
I was going to say, wait a minute, you've been working with me, so.
And, we're clear about what we do, and we're not we're not competing with each other. We're moving in the energy, and we're doing something in the energy. And so when you kind of look at Oprah, and, I mentioned in the last podcast about, even Bloomberg saying she's done a lot of unlikely firsts. Here's a perfect opportunity. And you know what? What a great idea. If I'm going to, because I also said in the last podcast, if you're going to Paris in October, how am I going to know that? Am I going to know that in your focus? Are you going to know that? Maybe you don't know that now. Like, if I'm going to we're just going to say what we got from the energy was what we know.
Right.
We're not doubting it. We're not having to prove it. We're kind of looking out there and saying, is this how we interpret what our actions are? And maybe we shouldn't.
So it's interesting, as you're saying that, I'm getting that the world is going to change. It's changing regardless of whoever's president. And you'd like to think if there's going to be a leader, you would like somebody, because in many ways I think of the president not as being all powerful, but kind of is a representation of what's the mindset of the people that he or she represents. And if I think about that, and I think about change, because we can't go back. We talked about this. There's no way we can go back to a career politician.
Right.
It's just not going to happen. If people, and when I say people, I mean the media and everything, thinks that Joe Biden or Bernie Sanders or whatever is going to be able to beat Trump, they just don't see it. People are secretly, quietly praising Trump because, not because he's so great, but because he is stirring up the garbage that we've been living with for so many years. It's gotten to where it's putrid water, and he's out there with the hose washing it all down. And that doesn't mean, you like him, but right now he's the only candidate that's cleaning up the mess that's been sitting there. And that is why, in my mind, he is going to win unless someone else can step in and say, I can do what you're doing, but I can do it better.
And it has to be someone unlike
Oh, it
anybody who's ever been there.
Yes.
And, you know, I started to laugh when you said you were mentioning some of the career politicians. And when you mentioned Biden, I had just heard, and I was flipping through, and one of the news stations said they found by a poll that when Joe Biden does not get in the news, he's much more liked.
Oh.
So now they're keeping him out of it, so he's much more liked. And, you know, you just think about that, and you want to talk about manipulation.
Oh, right.
I mean, that's going to be the president? No. I mean, when you
but you know what they say? They keep him out of the news because then he's not touching people's hair and sniffing their backs. What is he going to do? What is he going to do when he has a freaking, you know, meetings? He has meetings all the time with all these other people. Are they going to be like...
Wasn't that an old Pearl shampoo ad? Gee, your hair smells terrific.
I think that would be an amazing... They should do more on
Saturday Night Live, yeah.
Anyways, so... You know, I just think that if we're going to look at this, and sometimes I get frustrated. You watch the news like Fox or CNBC, MSNBC, blah blah blah.
Well,
I can't do it because it just frustrates me.
I don't. Randomly, I'll be doing something, working on something. I'll turn on the TV and I'll be like, seriously? From the little sound bite that I hear, and then I turn it off, and I think, oh my God, this. And then I turn it on 20 minutes later, and they're still talking about the same thing, the Russians. And, you know, they're still talking about, you know.
Talking about the same thing, the Russians.
And, you know, and then I told you that I had River Monsters on the other night, and he went to Russia, and I was like, seriously? They're not talking about him in Russia.
He's talking about the fish. So there you go. At the end of the day, there is nobody that can beat Trump that is a career politician. Trump... at this point is going to go for another 4 years because he is cleaning up what everybody wants cleaned up. And I will tell you, you could say what you want, whether you like him or not. I'm not a fan of him.
Yeah, me neither.
I'm not a fan of him, but I got to tell you, there's something about him staying in the energy. And you know, how many of those posts he hasn't filled?
I know.
And I
Isn't
think
the whole West Wing empty?
You know, I know. I'm thinking like, geez, what happens? The president could, all right, here's all the positions you got to fill. Like, what's that about? I would think a president would come in and say, wait a second, what do I need to do? This, okay, I've said forever when I've gone to companies, and some of them, as they're growing, I've worked with a lot of companies as they're growing. It's like, you know, you got to sit down and say, what do I need? And kind of create an organization chart. And then say, who do I have? And where would they fit in the best? And if someone doesn't fit in, you got to let them go. And then you know who you need to hire. You don't sit there and say, here's the organization chart. Just fill it with heads.
Right.
You just, I mean, that just goes against everything that makes sense to me. So the things that he's doing, I will say fiscally, business-wise, he's doing better than we've seen. Now, the presidency is not just about, you know, being fiscally conservative and watching your budget. That's a piece, but that's not the whole thing.
But that's a huge point, because from a business standpoint, he came in and he's running it like a business. He's running it like a business. That whole West Wing is empty.
Right.
And so doesn't it make you think, gee, it was full all the other times, but the country's still running.
Right.
So we don't need that whole West Wing.
Right. Well, that's what I said. Someone needs to take a step back and say, what am I trying to do here? And let me staff it appropriately.
And, you know, that reminds me, and I say this to you all the time. I mean, writers write, you know, to kind of change things, or to change the story, or to make things, you know, that they wish would happen or whatever. And whoever wrote that movie, Dave, remember, he came in and he was like the twin lookalike of the president, and that's the first thing he did, was he balanced the whole budget. And they were like, you can't do this. I always remember that scene. And when you say that, it's like there are certain things, I think, and again, we've said this notoriously numerous times in our podcast, we're not political. So we're not political. And so there are things that, you know, he came in and is running it like a business, and you know where I'm going to go, because who's got a really cool business out there?
I hear you, and I know you're saying it's Oprah. I'm going somewhere different. Trump is very good at running, money and cutting things back, maybe because they're talking about him being bankrupt or whatever. Maybe he's had to cut staff back and really what do I really need? And what I agree with you, Oprah is a good businesswoman, but, and this is where, we started off the podcast beating up on women. Here's the other side of it. Women have much more accessibility to their feelings. They can move in that space. They can move in that being a little bit more sensitive in general than most men. That doesn't mean every woman is better than every man. It's here's a gender thing, and it varies. So I'm not making a blanket statement. And the presidency now is more than just being fiscally responsible. That's a part of it.
And so Trump has been using everyone's feelings. And if women have more accessibility to feelings, this is where I'm going to go, because, we're doing this in the Ancient Text podcast. We're going into Neville Goddard's Feeling is the Secret. If feeling is the secret, then it's time for women, and I take myself included in it, to take that power and start to use it, because we have it so accessible to us. And I'm not using it against you, and I'm not using it against other women, but to create amazing things in the world for everybody.
Right.
And to do that as a woman, and what better person than a woman who has that complete accessibility to it? And Trump, you know what? I'll say he's doing a great job in there, manipulating, persuading, hitting the feelings. We talked about it all in our early podcasts with our book, that we looked at what he was doing. And, from a science and an energy standpoint, yet, go to the next level. Go to the next level of what you can do with feelings, and how you can create, and how you can just propel and change things rather than abuse them and manipulate.
So I'm saying, I agree that as a woman, it is more of a superpower, but it hasn't been used that way.
Right.
And I think that as women, of course, what do? We feel things, and so we get even more mad, and we hit another woman with a stronger feeling. Weinstein, do you think he really cares if you say, you made me feel this way? He's like, it's like he's like, I don't want to say things like brain dead. Like, what? What are you talking about? You felt what? He's not going to get it. A woman does get it, especially a sensitive, empathic woman, which, and again, and this is being general. I don't mean to say all women are, not all women are, and not all men are not.
Right.
It is general. Right. It's everyone falls in the spectrum somewhere in how strongly they feel things. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I'm saying, is that Oprah is, like you said, is a very smart businesswoman, but she's got this other side to her that Trump lacks. I think he just turns things off, and it's about him. And when it's not about him, he doesn't care. Oprah can't help but care. I think as women, we can't help but care. We try to mask it. We try to hide it. And I think the hardest part is when we can't do anything about it.
So I think it's time now that we don't say, but we have this. We say, and we have this. And knowing that that's our superpower, and that we use it.
So I think the presidency, Trump has done a lot in terms of cleaning up the fiscal mayhem. But there's a whole other side to the presidency. And I don't think he can step into those shoes. Oprah can. Mm-hmm. Career politician is like another,
let's go
idiot.
Back.
That's not going to work. That's going back to watching All in the Family and watch Woody Harrelson play Archie Bunker, and it just doesn't work because Archie Bunker, it was written for Archie Bunker. It was written for Carol O'Connor.
Right.
He made that role what it was.
Right.
And that's just what I think. It's at this point, and I can't help but know that is where we are moving towards. And we've said this. It's no mistake that you and I are both women.
Right.
Because we can come here and we work really hard. We could fight. We could do whatever. And we do fight to get to. But at the end of the day, it's really bringing all of who we are. I'm trying no longer to mask my feelings. I'm trying to keep them intact. I'm trying not to let them overwhelm me. But my feeling is who I am, as well as you and as every woman. And it's not that we have to sit here and cry. That doesn't help.
Right.
We can have compassion and understanding, but now we need to move. This is, I always think of Ronald Reagan, and I always remember he said when he had to make a decision, he listened to what everyone had to say, then he made his decision.
Right.
And that's what he did.
Right.
It's time for us to do that. Oprah?
Thank you for listening to this production from EI Alliance. Check out our Amazon authors pages for books and podcasts, along with our Donald Trump and Oprah books for this series. Find great music by New Threads on iTunes, Spotify, and on newthreads.us.